And that so much to me is the heart of student development work, right? We can't with our freshmen be like, and you've got to be like this. We have to actually, it takes us 4 years to get to the place where we can see that evolution and that change and how it's impacting their life.
And I think you see that at your universities. There's your approach, which hopefully is patient and other-centered, and then you see others, and it's like if they're confused about why you have such success with students.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cap and Gown. I'm Rachel Phillips-Buck, Senior VP for Student Success at Ferris Resources, joined for the first time in 2026 by our President, Matt Boisvert. Hey, Matt. Oh, you're muted. You've got to get back in the swing of things, sir.
I'm so out of it. Yeah.
Well, listen, not only have you been traveling every other time we've done Cap and Gown this year, but we are coming off of spring break. And spring break this year is kind of weird because it's split. Like some of our schools had spring break last week. Some of them have it this week. We just don't have like a super consistent spring break schedule, do we?
No, we don't. And I mean, yeah, so it's kind of interesting. And so my daughter, Ella, she has this week off. And my son and other daughter had last week off. And so I'm kind of, discombobulated and trying to keep track of like, where is everybody right now?
Yeah. It's Rebecca was telling me it's been really slow in support, hopefully because you all are going to do fun things. What did you do for spring break?
We went down to San Antonio. And so my 8th grade daughter, she, we went to SeaWorld. She wanted to go to SeaWorld, which I've never been to
SeaWorld. Yeah, I haven't either. What's the verdict?
It was a great day. You know, all right, I'll be honest, I was a little hesitant because of the killer whales, and I feel like the way that they had been treated and all of that, and so I didn't really know what to expect. But I feel like SeaWorld's really done a great job of, they've done a great job of educating, when you're in the park, all the ways that they're really focused on conservation and protection. And so
cool.
I think that there are definitely some things that were like, I don't know when they got started, but definitely 70s and 80s mentality.
Yeah. I don't think you can think about zoos too much because they're pretty depressing, just overall, but I'm glad that was fun. Happy St. Patrick's Day. You will notice that you are wearing green. I am not, even though I'm Irish. I totally forgot. To tell my daughter. But I will tell you, for spring break, we went to Savannah, Georgia. 2 things about that. First of all, that town's 140,000 people. It is the 2nd largest Irish population in the United States. So for St. Patrick's Day, the weekend before, they have a parade and like a lot of hoopla. The city it turns into 1 million people. So That's amazing. But I like Savannah. It's really fun. It's fun to go.
Is that all you're going to say about it? Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, you think about
how my car blew up. Is that what you want me to talk about?
Yeah, that happened.
You guys, I like a good. Yeah, we're a little bit wheels off today. I'm just going to be honest. Going back from spring break, we're a little bit wheels off. I drove my car 22 hours, 10 minutes away from Savannah. My engine had what the mechanic is calling catastrophic failure, which basically means, no, you're not going to have this car anymore. So Lillian and I had a great time making memories. We will never forget this trip. It was a great trip.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's amazing. I mean, to grow from 140,000 in a typical to 1 million people, because they have a nice beach close by, or?
No, they're coming for the St. Patrick's Day festivities.
Well, what do they do?
It. They have a gigantic parade. You can't listen. I know so much about this. I don't want to bore, I'll tell you afterwards. I got a lot to say about how amazing this is, but they're like very strict. They've got rules about when you can get set up, and they'll come and take your chairs if you set it up to it. Like it's a whole thing. Okay.
All right.
All right. Let's move on to State of the Union. Your plant tried to attack.
The mother-in-law tongue is whipping.
Sharp. Yeah. Okay, Matt, I've got a lot of articles for us today, but I'm not going to dwell on not any of them, most of them very long. So let me just go through a couple in rapid fire. The first one is I want you guys to be thinking about what is going to happen with accreditation. You remember that there's a lot of talk around this, not just from like in politics and the government, but also a lot of accreditation agencies are kind of putting a pause on how they've done things before. They're giving some extra time. They're reevaluating what they've done. It's really interesting. There are a lot of kind of new accreditation companies. So what's happening?
I'm discombobulated. It's fine.
Okay. All right. People who are just listening are going to be like, I don't know what is happening. Matt's camera's moving all around. Anyway, new regulatory language governing accreditors. What they're really trying to accomplish is schools that have for a long time taken federal money, but haven't maybe shown results like they would like. So what I like about it is they're inviting a lot of public comment and conversation, which I think will be good just to hear where people stand and what is going on there. Okay, the next thing I want to remind you of is actually not remind you. Did you read this article that Utah has a new bill in place that's been passed by the Utah legislature this month that will allow students in the state to opt out of some coursework that conflicts with their religious beliefs? And actually, the first change to this is they don't want it to be religious beliefs. They want it to be kind of like conscientious objectors. So what they're saying is assignments, broader impact. They don't just want it to be religious. They want it to be like a firmly held belief that you would be able to go to your faculty member and be like, I don't want to do this because it's making me, I hate to be snarky about it, but I kind of feel like it's making me think differently than what I think. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, let's just go back to like, I don't know, 1820. Okay. And let's think about ideas that you might have been challenged, to think through that in 1820, if the issue, like I can object to having to think about slavery in a different way, right?
Yeah.
Or like, come on, in America, I love, was it, the president of our alma mater, who was like, the whole purpose is that we are challenged to like every idea we should be able to discuss peacefully with respect any idea. Yeah. And you don't have to, if anything, I would challenge my kids, you disagree, go learn their side.
Yeah, the ones that you find most difficult, you should learn something about it. So there's a lot of conversation in here. Basically, what they're saying is that students can come to their faculty members and say, I have a sincerely held religious or conscientious belief. Then they would have to go to an arbiter to say, here's the other assignment that you can do. Is the faculty making accommodations for you? Obviously, lots of conversation about whether or not it's an infringement on academic freedom, because we know faculty don't like to be bossed. And so basically they're saying this restricts a professor's ability to make decisions about what they can teach and what they can assign. Also, like we just said, critics of the bill worry that students may opt out of reading and assignments that force them to engage with an alternative perspective. Those assignments that really require you to engage in critical thinking and grapple with perspectives and opinions that are different from your own are incredibly important, especially in college. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Well, fortunately, the word is could allow. They have not decided to allow,
True. Right? So, yeah. It is not.
I guess that doesn't pass.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is why ROI is tied to more than just major. And this is a really interesting article. It came out of a poster on TikTok, which you know how we love TikTok, who said she's a therapist. Her name is Ruth, and she argued that college is a white collar trade school. And she told her kids that she wouldn't pay for it unless they majored in one of four permissible fields, which were nursing, accounting, engineering, and computer science. Although she said, never mind on computer science because of AI. So you can be a nurse, you can be an accountant, or you can be an engineer. That's all I'm paying for. And the assistant vice president of scholarship at the United Negro College Fund, Rashim Rook, saw that and was like, hey, I think we're doing college a disservice when we only talk about ROI as informed by major. There's a lot of other things that go on for our students, especially, he says, for our first generation low income or historically underrepresented students. It's the first space where they're allowed to figure out who they actually are. And he's like, we should be talking about the meaning of life with our students starting when they're like in 10th grade. That's where a lot of that work goes on, helping them craft the understanding of like, how were they uniquely made and what are their gifts and those sorts of things. But this idea of just saying, yeah, if you're not going to major in something that is going to make you a lot of money, you shouldn't go to college. It's pretty interesting. This like interpretation that college is a job skills field is really interesting to me.
Well, you've always talked about the origin of liberal arts.
Yeah.
And so the idea that a liberal arts education will actually make you a more well-rounded conversationalist, right? Like
Thinker.
social, not socialist, but socialite, right?
Depends on the school, I guess.
But yeah, and so it when I think about my major, so I was in the College of Business. Okay, so people can say whatever, that's going to turn out fine. Like there's a high ROI for that. But talking to Josh, our friend Josh, who is a biology major, who now, he's a techie developer, entrepreneur, has helped several startups.
Yeah,
and he was just telling me,
he's a good thinker.
And he was telling me that this other good thinker that he used to work with was also a biology major, different university. And he is now a thought leader in AI. And so,
yeah, don't we think that college, let's all talk about what we're doing and what we majored in, right? It's very rarely a straight line. So I think drawing that straight line is a mistake for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, Matt, I want to move on to AI. I have a couple of really interesting AI articles. One that I'm really liking is called AI Exposes Where Learning Was Thin to Begin With. And the premise of this paper is that we have relied on proxies for understanding so often in education. So we're not really assessing whether or not a student understands. We are looking at things like correct answers. Can they write clean code in computer programming? Do they have polished writing? And those have been substitutions for whether or not a student understands. And this article is talking about how that's not going to work anymore, right? That you actually have to dig into whether or not a student understands, more importantly than whether or not they have correct code. So he's a developer. He's teaching IT and computer science and those sorts of things. And he's like, I can have a student that submits code that works, which is the right answer. But then when I dig into it with them, they have no idea why it works or why theirs is better than someone else's, or where there might be some errors, or where can we make it. So this idea of AI actually is very helpful in uncovering places where our students haven't understood something that we haven't had a great way to get at before. So it reminds me of math homework. My daughter, show your work. You got to show your work. Because if I say the answer is 65, but I can't explain how I got there, then I'm not going to get a good grade on that paper. So I like that idea of sort of utilizing it to help us better assess whether or not our students are understanding what they're turning in. And that article has a bunch of examples of how you can do that in class. For example, requiring explanation, not just submission. So turn in the right answer, but tell me how you got there, show your work. Asking for predictions before execution, which I really love. Like, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is true? What do you think would be the best step forward? Asking for comparison instead of construction. So this teacher gives multiple solutions, including AI generated ones, and then says, tell me what the trade-offs are in each of these solutions, which Matt, I love because we do this all the time at Ferris. We're always like, okay, here's 4 things we can do with our technology. What are the trade-offs? What are the philosophical underpinnings of that? Like, why are we picking to go down that path? So I think that's great. I would highly recommend this article. Anything about that?
A lot, but we can move on.
Okay.
I mean, I just think so where learning was thin, or where learning did not stick, like the instruction, the lessons didn't stick. I mean, I don't know. Math is an easy one to understand that. One thing that I love seeing, like, I feel sorry for the students today who got into college to be computer science majors, had never coded before. Somehow magically they're going to learn to be, great programmers while they're in college, but they've actually never programmed before. And it is an AI can be a crutch and take away the understanding of, like, the foundations of programming, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So what you're saying, like, how could you possibly evaluate this student's code versus this student's code if you don't know really, like, what the some of the foundational or the right approach or philosophy of development should be. So it's one thing that I'm really proud of, seeing the difference for my son and his hesitation with AI. It comes from, like, his understanding of coding, right? Like a deep appreciation for the process.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, right? You have to understand the basics in order to then critique or create outside of those basics. But you do have
I'm just thinking of a 1950s professor of mathematics when everyone walks in with a calculator and he's like, no, guys, no.
1950s? How about 1990s?
Well, I was thinking about him sticking around. His name's Sam Reynolds. He was my math.
Oh, he's like a real person, huh?
Yeah, he's
okay. Two more AI interesting things. There's really what I think is a funny article in Inside Higher Ed called "Journal Submissions Are Riddled with AI Created Fake Citations." It starts off with the story about this woman who got a call and someone was like, "Hey, can you send me the this paper that you wrote? Instructional presence and learner success in synchronous and asynchronous e-learning." And she's like, that sounds really interesting, but I didn't write that paper. That's not a paper I wrote. And they're like, but I have the citation, right? Like, in all of it's like the right citation, her name, the year, the name of the thing. And she's like, yeah, no, I didn't write that. And so this article is all about how my charitable read is that AI is trying to be helpful by making up citations for you and being like, this seems like something you should use in your paper. But the gist of this article is that it used to be citations you didn't have to check except for format, right? Like, did you put in the right you have commas and it's capital and all this stuff. And now they're like, we've got to check to make sure that that's actually a thing, because a lot of them just look realistic, but they're not real. So thanks, AI. Just made that kind of muddy. I told you that happened to me one time in a paper where I was like, they're like, here's all the articles you should include. And I was like, this one sounds really interesting. Can you link it? And they're like, oh, sorry, I lied. That's not really a paper.
I made that up.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. And then the last AI one is teens are using AI to research their college choices. Is that a good thing? Here's what I like about this article, Matt. I talked with Sherry a couple of weeks ago about how AI can fill the gap of a thing that's not good in a person's life. So in other words, if you don't have any friends and you're feeling kind of lonely, AI can fill that gap. Now, It's not as good as having friends. It's not as good as talking to a real person. But for somebody who's like, hey, I don't have this resource, AI can be really helpful. This article is relating that to students who maybe don't have a great high school counselor, who can't give them guidance about how to apply to college, isn't going to help them find a college, doesn't have the right questions to ask. If you don't have a college counselor, AI can fill in the gap there. It's obviously not as good as having someone kind of help you navigate that, but it is a possibility. This says more teens are turning to AI as a resource. 26% of students reported using technology to find a college in the spring of 2025, rising to 46% by the end of that year. So, like, obviously, this is growing just like in every industry that we're looking at. They're looking for schools that are a good match. They're using it to research the application process, discover new schools that they weren't already familiar with. And this says like a lot of people are choosing new schools, crossing schools off their list because of what AI is telling them. You and I have been talking about this, like, how do you get the algorithm to talk about your school or your company or your whatever in the most realistic way, right? Which is really a hardship, I think, for schools and for businesses both, to know how to get into the brains of that AI. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, well, your smaller institutions really needs to figure that out, right?
Yeah,
And and I think in particular making sure that your programs of excellence or distinguished programs need to be, that needs to be very clearly not just on your website, but like in print and,
yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. Like if you're at a school or you're that doesn't have great counseling services or
like guidance counseling,
great guidance or advice, I can understand that.
Yeah, for sure. This article also says that of these high school students, 37% said they were skeptical of AI. Skeptical is the adjective. More than any other. Is skeptical an adjective? Is it a verb?
He was skeptical.
I think it's a verb. Anyway, more than any other sentiment, not curious, not concerned, not optimistic, but skeptical, which that's pretty interesting. I think that's maybe a good sign. Okay. All right. New York University has created device-free spaces for students so that they can have meaningful face-to-face connections in a device-saturated world. This is coming out of the book of The Anxious Generation, looking at basically how do we put a space on our campus where students can put their phones in a charging locker, spend time with their friends, make crafts, play board games, connect with each other. Basically, they're creating human connection habitats to help our students better play with each other, basically. Just how do we have this free time for us to be able to interact and play with each other, which I love. I think it's a great idea.
I think that really ties in really well with our conversation today.
For sure. I think it's especially helpful when you look at the takeaways on student loneliness, which basically this is coming out of research that Trellis Strategies did on 44,000 college students. More than half of college students say they're lonely. Loneliness is tied to anxiety, depression, and lower satisfaction with the institution. Heavy social media use is tied to higher odds of loneliness. So just there's a lot of lonely students on our campus, and figuring out, I mean, it's one of the reasons why we picked to do this book, right? How to see others deeply, because you have so many students who are really lonely and don't have a good way to kind of make their community connections. So I think that's great. Okay, the last one I have for you is coming out of US News, which this is interesting because it's not higher education publication, right? But in this mainstream publication, the title is Today's College Academic Advising Isn't Cutting It, which we're not confused about. We all know this. Matt, I usually say there are 3 parts of academic advising. There's degree plan specialist to make sure you have your schedule. There's success coaching to just walk with you along whatever you encounter when you're in college. And then there's faculty guidance on the industry that you're in and jobs and internships and that sort of thing. And this article really is putting the onus on academic advisors to help students build durable skills like communication, problem solving, adaptability, all the while guiding them to align their education with a clear sense of career purpose. So that's actually weighing more heavily on advising in terms of career direction and purpose and conversations about where they see themselves in 10 years, which I have not seen very much discussion on our campus. I think mostly we're using academic advisors for like success coaches and then pushing off that other piece to our faculty. But this article is saying like, hey, it's really important that your academic advisors understand what their goal is and that they are more holistically connected to their students, which I love.
Well, I love that too. That was my model when I was director of a advising center, to bring in that career piece. So
yeah, I think it's great. The wrestle of college and liberal arts and career and guidance and all of those different elements, I think it's very motivated by what's happening in politics right now, like how we're trying to hold schools accountable, but then also appreciate that the ROI is not always about what your salary is, right? And so how do we do this measurement? And I think for smaller schools, it's especially important that they're able to articulate the value to their students beyond career, but not ignoring the purpose of your life piece, right? Like,
right.
We want to grow you into whole people, and that's the purpose. But we're not here to just be like, what job do you want? Okay, and here's how you're going to get training, right? So pretty interesting. All right, that is the State of the Union. Sorry, you can't say anything else. I
just wanted to come back and say skeptical is an adjective. It is.
I said adjective to start.
You started there, and that's why I took a long pause. I said he was skeptical. He's the subject, was is the verb, skeptical's.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is I want a gavel so that I can close the State of the Union. Okay. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't really
we'll find you again
for that. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Let's move on to our main content, which is How to Know a Person by David Brooks. We're reading this. Our team is reading this independently. Rebecca has finished the whole thing, so she was telling me it's good. We've got more to come. What's happening?
I'm sorry.
You were like drifted off.
I'm gonna find you a gavel now.
Where can I source a gavel?
You gotta find the gavel.
Yeah. Okay. So our chapter today is about accompaniment. And I really love this chapter, although I'm going to warn you, it's highly likely. I said this with Sherry last time. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's highly likely I'm going to shed some tears this episode because I just find this chapter so beautiful. And the examples that they give are really, I think, touching. So let me talk about what accompaniment is. First of all, it's really important. It feels like when we're saying that, it sounds passive, but actually it's an act of deep discipline. So you have to be very, very intentional about this idea of accompaniment. And he opens this chapter with a reflection of this man who, it's a long story, but he finds himself at a river and he decides to just like float in this river. And his whole purpose in doing this is just to like be like, what is it like to be this river? Like, how does it see the sky? And like, where are the fish? And how does this bend move? And it's deeper here. And he's just accompanying this river on its journey, right? He's not being bossy. He's not like telling them what to do or making judgments. He's just like, I want to be in this river and really accompany it on its journey. So it's not swimming what he's doing in this river. It's more like he's not investigating it. He's just going along with it, right? Just trying to understand what's happening. Absorb, right? Exactly. So it's really interesting because the first element of this accompanying our students or our families or our colleagues or our friends is this idea that we are just doing stuff together, not necessarily face to face, right? It doesn't mean that we have to be like, okay, how's it going today? But actually, just that we're side by side doing the same things together. And there's something really valuable about that. Matt, I was trying to think upstream thinking. One of the things he says is like, there are lots of ways for you to understand someone else's perspective. And one of them is to walk it, like walk the journey that they're going on, just like you would do in this river. That is accompanying a student's experience versus directing it or, being like, here's how it has to go, which I think is a really important element there. And he also says this idea of accompanying them is not studying a person, it's just getting used to each other, which I really appreciate as a concept, because sometimes I think we underestimate how important it is to just get comfortable with this person, right? It's why we do small talk a lot of times. It's why our friendships take a long time to develop, because we are just like absorbing the other person, getting used to them, being close to them, watching their journey, which I think is really fun. And you and I were talking about how this could be different for introverts versus extroverts, right?
Yeah, I think you and I are both introverts. We've seen the extroverts who it seems like they just hit it off with people, and people are excited to share information with them, and it seems like they're really connecting, bonding very quickly, whereas I'm very slow to
Yeah,
to
Matt,
do that.
we were laughing. I mean, I think I'd known you for like 6 years before I finally was like, hey, I think we're friends now. And you were like, why? And I said, well, because you called and I answered, which I very rarely do. But it took me 6 years to get like comfortable with you. Be like, okay, this is a person that I'm going to count in that sphere. So this idea of accompanying is all about kind of temperament and manner, understanding what this other person is. What is the energy that they bring to the relationship? And when we talk about danger brain and connection brain, the start of accompanying someone is all about this really subtle knowledge that you have of a person before you can even start to talk about things that are important. So it's just testing each other's energy and making sure that we have a clear picture of who you are. And that Sherry and I were talking about whether or not you have the face, not you, but one has the face where people feel like they should tell you their whole life story. I have it. She has it. Not everybody does.
I don't have it.
You should be, yeah, you should be happy that you don't. But as I have thought about that more, and what this author is saying is that there are ways to show up with people that really deepen your connection with them and create this layer of trust. And then there are ways that do not do that. And so I don't know if everybody is like this, but that I am always like, the first thing I'm assessing is this person safe? And by that, I mean, are they trustworthy? Can we talk about real things? Are they going to turn into a crazy person, right? Who likes drama and all sorts of stuff? Is this person safe? And that's the first step of this idea of accompanying. Anything to say about that?
No, I think that's interesting. I just took a trip on. I think it's a helpful first step for everyone to understand what their natural inclination is, what it is that they're trying to assess first. So for you, it's like, is this person safe? I'm not sure yet what mine is. Like when I meet a person, what I'm actually assessing. I'm not particularly, for the most part, unless I'm in a weird, unfamiliar place. That's not really the first thing that I'm thinking of. But I definitely am not assessing how we're going to get along and be great friends, right? so,
Yeah.
so, but I think that's a helpful first step, is just thinking like, naturally, these are the things that I need to set aside. So I think as David, the author's talking through, and he's talking about the difference between diminishers and illuminators, and he gave a long list of ways that people are diminishers, or what are the actions or behaviors of diminishers. I think that's a really, like, that's an important first place to look is like, what are the things that I naturally do that could diminish this engagement with this person versus illuminating it.
Yeah, it's funny as you say that because my perspective on that is I'm very good at not diminishing. What I'm assessing for is, are they a diminisher? Because I don't want to be around you if you are. Not interesting that like one is like, how am I doing a good job of being open to this versus I don't want to be around the kind of energy that is all of those things that he said about a diminisher, like not open, not curious. I don't, I'm not very good with people like that. I think it's interesting too. He talks about how important it is to talk about the little things, because if you talk about the little things, it makes talking about the bigger things easier, which I think is so true in higher education. If you think about advising, where you are talking about a lot of little things, you are talking about the schedule and the teacher and what do you think about this and what's right, like all these little things. And by way of those little things, you then get to the real things, the meaty things, because you've had patience and talking about these other things. It was one of my favorite things about working with students who weren't sure about their major is that it feels like we're talking about little things like what are you good at and what are you interested in and what would you like to do? But the truth is all of that adds up to what is the meaning of your life, which is a really deep thing. And you have to be very vulnerable to talk to somebody about that. You can't get there unless you have these little conversations, right? That are building trust and making sure that they know, like, I'm on your side. I want to be just a good person to walk alongside of you.
So I'm just thinking, Rachel, about this discipline of being right alongside someone, accompanying someone, being absorbed, or around this person, and how important that is. So when we think of in higher ed, just how critical that is for our students to see us do that, right?
For sure.
And so what that can lead to. So in a way, the author's talking about this in terms of having deeper relationships, like as a friend or people you can trust or people to be close to. But in our context of thinking about, in some cases, in a professional role with students, guiding them, being able to take this time to everything that you're saying here, where you are showing them that they're a person, they matter, and you're not trying to boss them. You're not, so when you think about it and advise, so that's where I went, is just thinking about advising and how you're so wired in this professional role that I get paid to boss, or in a professional role of a faculty member, I get paid to teach and tell them what they need to know. And this is not what we're talking about right now. It's actually, it's what you were saying from the State of the Union of like, there's actually this other piece of the ROI of higher ed actually comes from this part, right?
Yeah, sure.
So
yeah, he says it is acting in such a way that lets other people be perfectly themselves. Which, Matt, I was thinking about, one of the things we talk about a lot is how you define your job. So if your job is to get the degree plan done, or if your job is to make sure students are going to class, or if your job is to be as efficient as possible, right? If you define it that way, those are all solve things in our funnel. Those are all right. Like you've skipped identify, you've skipped connect, you've gone straight to here's what we're trying to accomplish. Well, this kind of accompaniment is not solve, it is connect. It's 100%. Getting used to each other, getting comfortable, understanding the other person's energy and needs, and then acting in such a way that they can be perfectly themselves. And we'll talk about this. One of the things he says is patience. And that is the ability to just let people live their lives the way that they do without your meddling with them, which I am very bad at. Like, the idea is that I'm not going to direct you or tell you or organize or whatever, but actually I'm just going to walk along and see what is your life like that you're living in without my getting in the middle, right?
Yeah. Well, when I think about your spring break and your challenges with your car and all of that. And I'm like, I probably didn't do a great job of staying out of it. Just,
You mean being helpful? You were very
yeah,
helpful.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So in this idea of accompanying, we've got to be very patient. Because trust is built really slowly. We have to hold back and be aware of other people's timetables. We don't obtain the most precious gifts by going in search of them, by waiting for them. Which I was thinking about, we like to watch The Dog Whisperer sometimes, and thinking about Cesar Millan and how he's like, when you meet a new dog, you ignore them because your job is not to go like get the dog. It's like to let them become comfortable with you, understand your energy, like understand what's happening in the room before you pursue them. And that's really what this patience is about, right? Can you linger with this person without looking at the clock and trying to make it more effective and more efficient? Just wasting time together, I really love. I was thinking about one of my good friends when I was getting my master's degree. We would linger together the whole day. We would start with coffee and then we would have lunch and then we'd go back to coffee. And what was happening during those times was not that I was like, tell me everything about you, right? But it was just like we were just to being together side by side, studying for things, having conversations. We really were accompanying each other on this journey versus this like very, very targeted, like, okay, what's going on with you, right? Which is impatient. It's actually demanding from people instead of just letting things develop. So I think it's interesting. Okay, let's see. Personal truths resent approaches that are too aggressive, too intense, too impatient. People rightly guard their own psychological space and erect gates that can be passed through only in their good time. I love this, Matt. You and I were talking about this line in the book that says, people have to know that you see their reserve as a form of dignity and their withholding as a sign that they respect themselves. So what you have to communicate to someone else is, you have every right to vet me, to make sure that I am safe, that we are comfortable around each other before I absorb all of these deep personal truths about you. And the idea that what I think and what I feel is very valuable and it's worth waiting for. I don't just throw that out to everybody. I want to find a trusted person in order to accompany me on whatever the journey is. I think is really, it's such a nice way to say it's why oversharers make us nervous, right? Because they're giving us a bunch of stuff that we're like, hey, that's pretty valuable. You don't know me too well yet. Right? Like we just met in this airport. I don't need to know all the things. I want you to really vet me and make sure that I'm trustworthy. Anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. I do want to read this quote I really love. And then I want us to harken back to what I call the Alaska coffee student. So here's the quote. Whoever wants life must go softly towards life, softly as one would go towards a deer and a fawn that are nestling under a tree. One gesture of violence, one violent assertion of self-will, and life is gone. But with quietness, with an abandon of self-assertion and a fullness of the deep, true self, one can approach another human being and know the delicate best of life, the touch, which I really love. This idea that we go softly towards our students and towards each other. And it reminds me of when we were at the school in Alaska, there was a boy who was like clearly didn't feel like he belonged, was kind of a loner, didn't have a community group. And the woman who was in charge of the tutoring center just watched him over the course of a semester. And she said it started with he would just walk past the tutoring center. She just noticed like and then after a while he would kind of stop and look in and then he would leave. And she was so patient. And then one day they had a coffee station. He like came in, didn't get coffee, but looked at it and left. Just like this very slow build to finally he came in. And I think the first time he came in, he started pouring coffee and one of the student workers was like, hi, can I help you? And he like scared-eyed put the coffee down and left. And then she didn't see him for like a week and she was like, oh no. And then eventually he came back and had a coffee. And then eventually they came to be friends, and she could help him through tutoring and coaching and all of that kind of stuff. But her patience to just be like, what I'm trying to convey to you is that I'm a safe person who would like to walk with you on this journey. I'm not going to ambush you until you say to me, I'm comfortable and I'm ready for us to be able to walk along together, I think is such a great example of that.
Yeah, I think if we were to step back, we could all think of a student like that who both, students who you maybe approached a little too aggressively and they poofed. But then you have those students where you were careful and how that slowly developed into a good mentoring relationship. And so I think going to this quote and thinking about your students, right, as softly as one would go toward a deer and fawn that are nestling under a tree, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's, when I go for a walk and I see, like a year ago, I was on a walk and saw a huge uh, deer buck that was just like right off of the path. And it was like, I wanted to just walk as slowly as possible so as to not scare them. But to get as close as possible because this was a magnificent animal.
Yeah.
And if you think about that kind of care, right? That kind of so that desire that you would have to get that close and not be just not wanting to scare them off, right?
Yeah, Matt,
Too aggressive with students.
I think it's an interesting caveat to students want to be seen, because you can imagine that someone could interpret that as an aggressive being seen, which I will tell you, if I were a student, when I was a student, if I felt like someone was aggressively seeing me, I would have poofed, right? I would have been like, this is too much and it feels overwhelming. And I don't know you. Like, I don't know why you're saying things about me. I don't know you. So this idea that we want students to be seen, but we also want them to be seen in a way that feels safe for them. Not that we call them out and just say like, hey, I see you, but like, let's be careful. Depending on who they are, they need different approaches to that. All right. I was going to tell you a story about that, but now I can't remember what it was. So it must not have been that exciting. It's gone. Okay. The next thing that we talk about with accompanying is that it's very playful. And he defines playful as like just like a very loose manner, relaxed. You're becoming yourself. You actually are able to connect with other people without necessarily trying. Playfulness creates a condition for genuine connections. And he has a great example of how when his son was younger, he's like, I spent hours with this baby into, when he was 1 year old. And we would just play together and we would do things together for hours at a time. And at one point he was like, I know this kid better than I know anyone else on the planet. And they probably know me better than anyone else does. Why? We can't talk to each other, right? Like, we're not having deep conversations. We just are spending time together playing. Like, I'm bouncing him and we're playing. And you learn about other people in that relaxed space where you can build connections. So I love that idea of playfulness, because I think sometimes people are so serious about the connection that it's actually scary. You know what I mean? Like, hey, your intensity is scary. Can we just like hang around together and play instead of this like very intense, like, tell me who you are, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, settle down a little bit. Matt, you and I have this with our team when every Christmas we play Pictionary, which is we all write clues about things that have happened to us over the year, and then we all play Pictionary together. And there's something really beautiful that happens when you're playing together. Just you learn about other people and you are working together, or you just understand something about a person as you watch them play and as you're playful with them. And it's kind of like in the Illumination, this idea of affection, right? Playful affection is a way that you make other people feel really comfortable in letting you walk alongside them.
I was thinking about, I forget what we called it, but I think it was modeled around Survivor, But we had a play day in the campus center for students to come. I think we invited seniors, but it was like, kind of a old school test of career apt. I don't know. Like we had a typing test, who could type the fastest. So like we just made games up,
Yeah.
right? And what that allowed. Oh, and of course, you remember the purple desk that I painted,
Mm-hmm.
like that I would just like randomly take to places and but the idea, like, how can we show students that we are fun, that it's not just as we're not just serious, like, but we are playful.
Yeah.
We're approachable and playful, and
Yeah.
and so I think that so yes, all of this stuff that David Brooks writes about, like what play does for kids, all of those benefits for kids, that it develops their emotional regulation and frustration tolerance, it builds their social skills, it fosters creativity and divergent thinking, it supports identity formation through role play and narrative play, reduces their stress hormone cortisol, and builds stress resilience, improves executive function. All those things we know, that's why we like it. And when you can show that you're playful, you are showing your students the side of you that is approachable,
Yeah.
and a way for them to. It is what you've said about the amygdala, and for them to let their guard like relax, and now we can go into, we're not in defensive mode or stress mode, danger brain, but now we're in connection brain, and that moving into connection brain, what that then provides for us, being able to see a side of them as they see a side of us that they may not expect, whether you're in a career center or advising center or counseling or
Faculty. Yeah.
yeah.
I think that there's something about playfulness that talks about safety to another person, right? You don't play with people that you don't trust. You don't play with people that you don't know. And so it does say, like, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to direct you. I'm not here to tell you what you're doing wrong. We're actually entering into this together. And there's some vulnerability that I'm showing you in being playful, instead of showing up like very, very stern. Right. So, Matt, I think about, we have the example of the email where the person who I know felt very insecure. And so it was like every time she would sign her email, it'd be like Rachel Phillips Buck, MMFT, LPC, blah, 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 SVP, like all of this stuff. And you're like, that's not playful. That's scary. Versus writing an email that would be playful, right? That would kind of engage students in this safer way instead of trying to, what you said earlier, like influence them with your power or your position or your expertise or whatever, instead of just being like, help me understand what's going on with you, I think is really important. Okay. The other thing here is other-centered. So we have this idea that we're playful, we have this idea that we have patience, and then we have that this accompanying is other-centered, which means I'm not in charge of this journey, you are. But I'm not a passive bystander, right? So you have the ability to make choices. You can decide what you want to do, but I want to be an accompanist to you, which you think about in music, this idea that somebody is the featured player and I'm going to accompany you. And what does that take? Like, it takes a lot of skill and a lot of discipline and a lot of being able to understand what the other person is putting down and how you can show up as complementary to that. It is definitely not a hands off. It is this discipline of paying attention to another person. Matt, I was telling you, this reminds me of grandparents. So when my daughter was young and my mom would come, like what my daughter's used to is, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in the day we got to do. I got to go to work. I'm going to drop you off at school. We got to come home. I got to make dinner. You got to make sure you do these things. Like, that's what she's used to. And when my mom or my sister would come, what they would give her is just this, like, I'm delighted to be with you. What do you want to do? Right. And she's like, I want to go to the park. Then we're going to the park. I want to swing. Then I'm going to push you on the swing. This idea that it's just how can I watch you walk through life and not make it about me and what I want to do and what's most important to me, right? Now, I don't have to be effective and efficient. Actually, what we're doing here is I'm learning about you and how you approach things and how you experience things, which is so valuable.
Well, I gotta say, I mean, this spring break trip, going to SeaWorld, like the whole thing. This is what Olivia wants to do. I'm not gonna direct it. And so while we're at SeaWorld, it actually put me in a relaxed state
Yeah.
to not be in control. To just like, what would you like to do? Do you want, so we rode this roller coaster, which I didn't know SeaWorld had roller coasters, but
Yeah.
okay, they do. So we rode it and we were in the very front because I said, you really want to experience the front or the back. And so we got right in the front and we did that. And then I look back and it's the line's like, there's no one in line. I said, the line's open. You want to write it again? She said, yeah. So she went right again. We sat in the back this time. And I was just thinking like, this is really fun. Whatever, I'm just here for the ride, right? And her only thing was she had already gone to the Alamo. She didn't want to do that while we're in San Antonio. But I was
But
able to
that
slip
is
that in there.
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting the discipline it takes to allow that to unfold, right? Because we're
Yeah.
so used to being bossy that it takes a lot of discipline to just be like, okay, what he says is you have to let others voluntarily evolve, which is part of that patience piece. We can't force it. We just have to walk with this person as they're making changes and evolving into someone else and how it's impacting their life.
And I think you see that at your universities. There's your approach, which hopefully is patient and other centered. And then you see others, and it's like if they're confused about why you have such success with students.
Right.
Maybe this
Right.
is a great book that you could hand to them, be like, hey, this actually does a great job of explaining kind of this, just try it. Just try a more patient, other-centered approach.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, the last piece in accompanying is about presence, which I really love. This is just like, hey, you got to show up. And you were saying the examples in the book are like, you should go to the funeral, you should go to the wedding, you should be there when someone is grieving. But you were saying like, you should go to the baseball game, you should go to the basketball game, you should go to graduation, you should go to chapel or the events that you're having. Showing up and having that presence is another way that you communicate. Like, I want to understand what your experience is like. So I really love that. Do you want to say something?
I've got a collection of videotapes that I got from my parents' house, and one of the videos is actually from my senior dinner, graduating from ACU, and sitting next to a professor who I had for one class, and him being able to talk with my parents and have conversations with them about me, but him showing up and being at that dinner, probably the best part there is that they called my name to be recognized as a student athlete for running track. Now, what's funny about that is my dad's looking at me like, what, did you run track at ACU? Well, no. And this professor who had me for one class also was curious about this. And I was like, they got the wrong person. There was another guy with the same middle and last name, not me. He was the one who ran track. They gave it to me. But but he knew me well enough. Because he showed up. I just think about, there are little things on your campus where you have these opportunities to say to a student, I care enough. He that was Terry Pope. And like we stayed connected, still are. So
yeah. Well, two examples coming out of the book are one where a faculty member early in the semester would have all of the students bring pictures of their family. And then over the course of the semester, her husband passed away unexpectedly. And so she was saying at the end of that class, it's going to be very hard for me next semester. Oh, this is one where I'm trying to make it through without crying. It's going to be very hard for me next semester because when we all bring pictures of our family, I'm going to have to bring this picture of my husband, and I'm like stressed about it because it's going to be hard. You're going to have to tell the rest of it. I can't tell it. Did you read it?
So the next year she walks in the class and she knows immediately something's off, something's interesting going on because this class is way too full. And as she looks around, she sees not only does she have her new class of new students to show and talk about pictures, but she had all of the prior year students from that class. They all came back the next year because they knew it was going to be hard for her. And that, yeah, it's powerful. And I was saying, Rachel, a year ago, I lost my dad. And I can tell you, every one of my friends who came to that funeral.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it's one of those things that I don't know. I think I took those things for granted, until you're in that moment of grief
Yeah,
and
people
you
just showing
realize that,
up for
oh,
you. Yeah.
yeah.
I was grieving about something recently and it was really interesting. I was telling one of my friends and she just moved close to me and held my hand. And I don't even think she said anything, right? I'm doing a terrible
Yeah, I
job.
don't know. Well, the other powerful thing was a woman who was talking about going to her friend's wedding, and she's sitting at a table with all of her friends, and then at the wedding, the father daughter dance, and so her friend who's getting married goes to dance. Well, her father had just passed away, and they'd had this conversation about that loss of like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be there for you on these special events. And so when she sees her friend dancing with her friend's father, she becomes overwhelmed. She gets up and she leaves and she goes to the bathroom. And when she comes out, all of her table, all of her friends are waiting for her. And what she says is, I don't think anyone said anything to me. They were just there. They hugged me. They gave me their support. Even the boyfriend that I had just barely gotten to know, all of them, though, showed me that I mattered. And so I think this part of presence, this being absorbed by the being in the life of, not trying to change the direction of the river or this person, but being there for and paying attention to. When I think about just this past year and the grief and what loss, what that feels like, knowing that you have friends who show up and are right alongside you,
Yeah,
and all that says a lot about your care for them,
for
and
sure.
that's how you're going to have lasting relationships, with your students, with your peers, your colleagues, right?
Yeah, he talks about it just in terms of being a witness. So he says it's not improvement, neither of the other nor of the self. The ultimate touchstone is witness, the privilege of having been seen by someone and the equal privilege of being granted the sight of the essence of another, to have walked with them and to have believed in them, sometimes just to have accompanied them for however brief a span on a journey impossible to accomplish alone. Which, Matt, to wrap up this idea, I think about our students and the journey of their journey as a river, right? So it starts in a place and it's going to go all the way through their lives. And we have them for a short amount of time on that river. There's 4 years, maybe one class, maybe 1 year. There's varying times where we get to be part of that story. And what a shame to be in such a rush to accomplish things or be efficient or what check a thing off the list. What a shame to be in such a rush that you miss accompanying them for that short amount of time that you have the privilege to do it. And so, part of what I'm saying in higher education is always we come back to our values, we come back to what's important about higher education, what we believe in about student development. I think this is a great way to have the language to remember why we do the work that we do. It is
Yeah.
a privilege to be invited to accompany someone on their journey for however long or short that happens to be. And don't miss it. Don't be so busy that you miss all of these little opportunities to better understand somebody and how they're walking their path.
This chapter is such a beautiful understanding of what you mean when you say first you connect, then you can solve, but you
Yeah,
have to invest in the connection. This is a beautiful way of really understanding what that can look like, and the visualization there of just like, hey, I mean, I don't know, like, um, maybe not, I don't know, just we're gonna get in our inner tubes and we're gonna float down this river together,
yeah,
and that's kind of beautiful,
yeah,
right?
for
So,
sure. Yeah, for a short amount of time, we have the privilege to be together, so let's not miss it for sure.
and Yeah, Rachel, if you play that out, you just think about like if you're on the Guadalupe or whatever, and as you're floating, sometimes you hit some white water, occasionally, right? And if you're with this person alongside, like that shared experience of like, I'm not trying to tell you how to handle your tube. We're both in this. We're going to experience it together and see how we, you know, um, react to that, but how much better we are because we're doing this together.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. I think this is a great book.
Yeah,
I think this is a like campus, like everybody should read everybody should read this book and do like book club around it, right?
we were talking about the trend of freshmen wanting to live alone.
Mm-hmm.
So their accommodations, they want a single room, single occupancy room, and I just think like actually before we agree to that, you have to like try this, just
Yeah.
try it.
Try connections with other people and see how that feels.
Try to be a roommate, you know?
Yeah. That's always an adventure, isn't it? All right. Well, we will keep going in this book. I'm really excited because we have it for the full year. So there's a lot more to come on this book. And Matt, I think I'm going to kind of weave it in with this other book, which is all about AI. I think it's a good balance of like how we see people deeply, but then also how we can use technology. We don't want it to be scary. We just want to have some good philosophical underpinnings of how we implement AI technology. So more to come. Happy March, happy spring break, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Rachel.